Jai Ramdin was born on the 4th of April 1946 as the first of 10 children born to Krishnauti and Mohanlal Singh Ramdin. They lived and grew up in Nouvelle France, Mauritius. Life wasn't easy, and growing up, my father had to shoulder more responsibility than some children and teenagers today have to bear, and took his role and responsibility as the oldest sibling very seriously. Growing up in a Hindu household, my dad ensured that his other siblings would attend temple every week on a regular basis. Some of my dad's fond memories growing up included learning how to swim in the river behind the tea plantation in Nouvelle France, eating biryani on the beach with his family, and swimming to the island in the middle of the holy lake Grand Bassin for a dare. Though they were poor, they still found time to enjoy the beautiful island of Mauritius. My dad completed his education at the Mauritius College in Curepep and did very well, and afterwards he got a job at the valuations office in town. Despite having a fairly decent job there in Mauritius, life was still hard, and my dad made the decision, like so many others, to leave behind and go to England. Flights were expensive, and some family members kindly lent and then later gave the money for a ticket on a boat. My dad bought a third-class ticket on a cargo ship where he was down sleeping on a hammock in the belly of the ship, surrounded, as he said, by hunks of beef. The ship docked in various places in Mombasa and in Djibouti before making its way up the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, across the Mediterranean, where it docked in Marseille. My dad then took a train across France to Calais, then another boat from Calais to Dover, and then a train from Dover here to Victoria Station, where he was met by his cousin Kumari. All of this he did at just the age of 19. A postcard he sent soon after he left to his mother shows it was just after his 19th birthday, and he did this in hope of a better life for himself, his family, and his future posterity. It takes a certain level of determination, commitment, and desire to be an immigrant, to leave behind what's familiar and go to a new country. Though life was better, it still wasn't easy as an immigrant in 1960s Britain. But my dad set about to get his nurse's training here at St. Ebba's Hospital in Epsom. Like so many of his siblings and cousins, this hospital was a gateway to a new career in this new country. My dad enjoyed 3 years here at the hospital, building community and building friendships here, and he was followed soon after by his cousin Jiwan and also his brother Prakash, and others would follow later on. My dad obtained a nurse's training here. It was known as the RNMS, Registered Nurse in Mental Subnormalities at the time, and he graduated and completed his class with distinction. He received a Medal of Merit from Lord Grenfell, chairman of the hospital board, also in the presence of Lady Grenfell, his wife. After St. Ebba's, he came here to Watford General Hospital, where he did his registered general nurse training. From here, he went to Shenley Hospital in Hertfordshire, where he did his RMN, registered mental health nurse training. As he was able to, he would like to send money back to his family to help support them. And as his siblings, or some of the siblings, came over here, he would help them settle as best he could. It was during his time here at Watford General Hospital that he came in contact with my mother, Eulogy Christiansdottir. She was living and working here, having moved to the UK several years earlier. At the time, my dad was still a Hindu, though my mother was a Seventh-day Adventist. In his own words, he said, "I had no knowledge of the Bible, and God put me in touch with Eulogy, my future wife, and through study, I received faith in the fulfillment of prophecy." As their friendship grew, she made it clear to him that her faith and church community was very important to her, and so he decided to look into it. Our dad always had a religious leaning, and he studied this new faith system with a church member called Samuel, and also completed the Voice of Prophecy study lessons. Though it was prophecy that sparked his initial interest, he fell in love with Jesus and the beauty of the gospel, and was baptized here in the Stanborough Park Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1969 by Pastor Ernest Logan. He was always grateful to our mother Eulogy and believed that through meeting her, the whole family has benefited. He held my mother in high esteem and wanted it said in his closing days that my mother was a woman of Proverbs 31 verse 10 to 12. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. In 1971, my parents got married in Reykjavik, Iceland, and began married life in Watford. In 1972, they moved here to Abingdon as my dad got a job as a district nurse. During the 7 happy years that they lived here, the family grew from 3 to 6 as Esther, Sarah, and myself were born here. They were not a rich family, but they enjoyed many rich experiences. In 1975, always up for an adventure, my dad, along with 2 toddlers, a heavily pregnant wife, and some family members, embarked on an adventurous trip across Europe to the 1975 General Conference session in Vienna, Austria, a trip that was memorable to all who went. During their time here, they were also an integral part of the young Oxford Seventh-day Adventist Church, with my dad enjoying their time there and making many lifelong friends. He would enjoy visiting and going back in later years from time to time, and the last time he went there was in 2022 for the 50th anniversary. In 1979, another move would occur. Due to the growing Asian community in Leamington Spa, the local authority needed more Asian nurses, and my dad got a job as a community psychiatric nurse in Warwick and Leamington, where he worked for the next 22 years until his retirement at the age of 55. He enjoyed working there and was part of a group of nurses who stayed in touch after their retirement and would meet up regularly. When my parents moved to Warwickshire, they moved into a house owned by the local health authority on the grounds of the Central Hospital, and our family has called this road home for the last 44 years. Many happy times were spent in the home, and my dad always felt fortunate, especially in his closing years, that he was blessed with a house with such a large garden. He grew fruits and vegetables, and in his later years, he planted the apple and pear trees behind me. He loved to do work on the house, sometimes much to our dismay, and my brother and I spent many a Sunday growing up moving slabs across the garden and laying them as best as our amateur selves could. Later extensions were built, sheds were built, greenhouses were made, sometimes with scrap windows and so on. He had an aversion to spending money, especially when he thought he could do the job for free or much cheaper, and was always happy with his work, even if it wasn't at tradesman level. As children, we enjoyed many happy years growing up, picking apples in the orchard with my dad's unique apple picker, going on Sabbath afternoon walks across the countryside, and going on bike rides, sometimes as far away as Coventry, cycling up the A46 dual carriageway. My dad liked to exercise and was a jogger, joining in the local hospital fun runs, and also liked to play tennis and table tennis. He taught us all how to play table tennis, and the table is still at our family home today. He won several table tennis competitions over the years at Aberdaron Family Camp and also at Coventry Central Church. Tennis he enjoyed, especially with the youngest Praveen. They would go around town trying to find courts to play in for free, going into the local secondary schools so they could avoid paying the £1.60 here at Victoria Park, always trying to save money. Hospitality was very important to my dad, and the guest book here in our home is filled with many names, some of them names of random strangers that he would meet on the street in town and invite them back here to our house. Other pages are filled with the names of family members from Mauritius from his side and also Iceland from my mother's side who came and spent time in this home. There's also the names of lots of church friends who came here on Sabbath afternoons, but also lots of names of people who my family would invite back here to the house to eat on Sabbath afternoons when they had nowhere else to be invited. And we learned important lessons of hospitality as children from our parents. There's also the names of some famous Adventists from certain generations. There's the name of Graham Bradford, Jack Sakira, Colin Standish, Russell Standish, Ron Spear, and those familiar with the nuances of Adventism, especially from those time periods, will understand the huge variance in theological beliefs between some of those names. My dad had the ability to make friends with people even he disagreed with, invite them back to the house and spend time eating together, recognizing that the dining table was a place for unity rather than contention. Living here, we attended Coventry Central SDA Church, where my dad and my family held a variety of leadership roles. He served as a deacon and an elder, amongst other things. We enjoyed the vibrant community that this church had and spent many Sabbath afternoons going to people's homes in the summers, going on Sabbath afternoon walks. He was an avid ingatherer and was often the top collector here in this church. And every time there was an evangelistic campaign, our family would sign up to distribute thousands and thousands of leaflets all over Coventry for hours and hours by hand. When the theological controversies hit the church in the UK here in the 1990s, my dad's involvement and attendance at Gaisley Bible Fellowship became a problem in the eyes of some, and he was no longer able to hold local church office. In spite of this, he never wavered in his convictions, and despite visits to our family home from the highest elected administrators in both the conference and the union, he never wavered in his convictions and what he saw as truth. He wasn't a man swayed by the opinions of others or who bowed to public pressure. These were tough years for this church and for my family and dad, and two things stand out for me. Number one, he never wavered or changed in his understanding as to how he saw various issues. And number two, perhaps more importantly, he never let it turn him bitter or resentful and continued to attend and support the church. In later years, he would attend Coventry Henley Green Church, and he enjoyed the fellowship and community there. Gaisley Bible Fellowship and its mission in the early years was something my dad believed and participated wholeheartedly in. We remember weekend trips to Gaisley as well as summer trips to various camp meetings in France, Italy, Holland, and the Czech Republic, with myself as the designated map reader along the way, which often led to some contentious debates. We drove to the south of France twice, 2 years in a row, not taking the toll roads, but only on the A roads in order to save money, going through all the little towns on the way. We got to see a beautiful part of Europe and spend time together as well. My dad made great friends in many of these camp meetings and at Gaisley, which still continue to this day. Family time was something special and a priority in our family. Growing up, special events were not to be missed, and my mother ensured this was the case and remains the case to this day. Though my mother often took the lead in the planning of these things, my father was actively involved and helped to plan many family camping trips. Aberdaron Camp was a regular part of our childhood growing up in the 1980s, coupled with summer trips to Shell Island, Wales, a favourite place of my dad's. When we were younger, we didn't have that much money and couldn't afford expensive holidays, and we couldn't afford to go to Mauritius, but that didn't stop us taking trips as a family and bonding together. We remember as children going to Shell Island and pulling a sled across the sand with our lunch on it of cooked rice, potato curry, rugai, and lentils. When we were younger, we'd be embarrassed and sometimes wish we could just have triangular sandwiches and Walker's crisp like everyone else, but we now look back on these eccentricities with fond memories. Family time was important, and we enjoyed the family reunions that we'd have with the Mauritian side of our family growing up, especially when our nanny would visit from Mauritius, and also when the Icelandic family would come and visit. Visiting relatives across the UK was a regular thing we did in our early years, going to Kidderminster, Leicester, Brentwood and Kingston upon the Thames, building memories as a family. Every 3 years or so, we'd do a family trip to Iceland, and my dad loved to go and was fully embraced by my mum's family there. Even though he spoke little to no Icelandic, he still had a way of connecting with people. We spent many summers there and built some great family memories. Iceland was and still remains an integral part to our family identity. My dad loved to go to the swimming pools there, especially because they were so clean. We also used to love to visit the in-laws' homes, to go to my uncle's farms and to go to the summer houses and enjoy the natural beauty of the country. One thing we would always do on our family trips there was to go on the Golden Circle tour and enjoy the beautiful landscape. Our dad was especially fond of his grandchildren, and beginning in 1991, his first of 15 grandkids was born, Joseph. He loved to spend time with them, especially when they were babies. He loved to have them sit on his lap, and he would connect with them in his own quiet way. It amused me how in later years they also had to move slabs across the garden, just like my brother and I had done years ago. At the age of 55, my dad retired and set about to enjoy his newfound freedom. He was also now free of dependents and had more disposable income than at any other time of his life. He enjoyed holidaying in America at Esther and Udo's house and made regular trips back to Mauritius. He enjoyed going there and staying in the family home, visiting old friends and family, and going to the places he had frequented as a child and teenager. He often invited us to go back with him and try and organize evangelistic trips there as well. In 2019, my brother Praveen and our mother went back there to Mauritius with him. And we had planned to go back there as a big family trip in 2024. However, it's a sad regret of many of us that we did not get to go there with my father and see the places he had grown up and hear the stories of his childhood and upbringing. Unfortunately, he would only enjoy 6 to 7 years of retirement in good health, and in late 2007 he contracted an autoimmune disease called pemphigus vulgaris. The chances of getting it are 1 in 5 million, and doctors are still unsure today of the exact causes. The side effects are sores on the head, on the back, and inside the mouth, amongst other things, which is why many of you in recent years would have seen my dad with a hat on at all times, even in indoor public places. He treated it with steroids and tried to keep it under control, and several times he went to different clinics and lifestyle centers to try and cure it, all to no avail. He would learn to live with it and would blend his food and have meals in the kitchen that would seemingly last for hours. He would still get up and go around the country, visiting friends and family, random people he would meet, and visiting churches and enjoying his life as best he knew how. He did not let his disease stop him getting around. In the last 7 years, he suffered 4 heart attacks and had 3 stents inserted into his heart. He also had diabetes. For the last 16 years, with the pemphigus that he had, he was on steroids, and one of the side effects of the steroids was that it lessened and weakened the density of his bones, leading to a decreased strength. With less strength and ability to get around, he had to figure out a way of moving around and getting places, and so he bought mobility scooters, 5 to be exact, much to our dismay. But he had a reason for every different type of scooter that he bought. He enjoyed riding these up and down the canal, into town and back, and across the various walks that we used to go to when he was able-bodied. He would not just sit still. When the Queen died, unbeknownst to most of the family, he left on his scooter to the local train station, boarded a train down to London Marylebone, then made his way across London without a map or a sat-nav, asking random passers-by along the way which way was Westminster, and then he paid his respects to the Queen. After that, he then drove all the way across London to Kingston upon Thames, where he stayed with his cousin for the night. Then he made his way back early the next morning and took the train back home. Problems would be overcome. His body gradually weakened, and with each hospital visit and ambulance call, we kind of knew that his time left would not be too long. This summer in July, we were able to enjoy a family holiday to Aberdaron, where most of the family were able to spend several days together. In August, he contracted COVID-19 pneumonitis and was admitted to Warwick Hospital, where he spent 4 days. He was discharged with a seemingly clear bill of health and hosted a couple from Australia that weekend. On Monday, though, his oxygen levels had dropped and he came back here to hospital, and unfortunately, the oxygen was not able to go back up. He was put on a mask and oxygen and slowly had to increase it until he was on 15 litres. Our mother Indira and Sarah looked after him in the hospital until Praveen flew back from Finland and I myself returned from Hungary to be with him. Finally, as it looked like he would not pull through, the final sibling Esther flew back from America here to England to be with him. He was moved onto end-of-life care, and over the next 4 days and 3 nights, as a family, we spent the time together round the clock in the hospital, and we're grateful to the ward for allowing us to do so. He was pleased that in his final days, he was able to visit with his brothers and cousins and other family members, and as he bid each person farewell, it was a sad time. He enjoyed the visits from his UK-based grandchildren, as well as the phone calls and voice messages and video calls with his US-based grandchildren and the ones here in the UK who were too young to go to the ward. His heart was at peace in the final days, happy that some relationships had been restored. He said many times how grateful and how fortunate he was. One thing he said, and the words he said were these, that I believe I'm more fortunate than the Queen herself. I have 3 daughters and 2 sons, and they're here with me in the hospital room holding my hands. I don't think the Queen had treatment like that. Our dad had hardly slept the last week of his life as breathing was difficult, but from Thursday midday until Friday late afternoon, he slept solid. As we watched his chest rise and fall with each breath, we wondered how much longer. As Friday afternoon came by, eventually his breathing slowed down and we gathered round as a family and read him 2 poems that his cousin G1 had written for him, and also 3 Bible passages. As the last Bible passage was read, his breath then slipped away. We are incredibly sad, but also grateful that we got to spend those final days and moments together as a family and realize how rare and special that is. Our dad and husband was a man who lived his life unmoved by the opinions of others, sometimes eccentric, a warm and kind man who some said smiled with his eyes. He loved God, loved his family, and wanted the best for each of us in our own way. He lived a full life and will be sorely missed. Rest well until the resurrection. See you in the morning.